We are forward thinkers, bridge builders, regulation innovators, and ideas instigators. We are the CERRE community. We work across the energy, mobility, tech, media, and telecom sectors to move regulation forward.
We are a community of remarkable people, rich in our diversity.
We are economists,
policy scholars,
energy and regulatory economists,
lawyers and engineers
from renowned universities around Europe. We provide decision makers with original and concrete recommendations to help them develop rules that safeguard European citizens' rights, nurture fair competition, and foster innovation. We hold our research to the highest standards of quality and independence. We build bridges, we enhance cooperation and dialogue between different actors, sectors, and agendas. Since 2010, we have published more than 100 studies offering new ideas to address societal challenges. We have grown from 13 to 50 members, regulators, companies, and academic centers from across the world. We have brought together global CEOs, political leaders, leading regulators and thinkers to debate burning issues. We have established our think tank as a reference for independent top-quality research towards European and national decision makers.
We are unique.
We are CERRE.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this public webinar organized by CERRE today around the launch of a new issue paper focusing on energy data sharing and the use case of electric vehicle smart charging. This report was now available on our website since this morning, and we are very pleased today to organize this webinar with our academic lead who developed this paper and also discuss it with distinguished speakers from the Commission, but also from the industry and regulatory bodies. This paper is actually very timely, and it aims to contribute to the debate that is actually coming now at EU level around the action plan on digitalization of energy from the European Commission that wish to encourage the development of an energy and data space in Europe to facilitate data sharing and system integration between energy sectors and other fields. The CERRE, a recent project that is dedicated to a cross-sectoral policy research project on this topic, aimed to identify the business case and guiding principles for the development of a European energy data space using the concrete example of smart electric vehicle charging points. This is the first publication today for this project, and it aims to map and present the key issue related to energy data sharing and smart charging. And building on this initial publication, we will also have analysis and policy recommendation reports to be released a bit later in the year, around October. So today I'm delighted to have our academic team who drafted this issue paper with us, and they will present first the main finding of this paper. And before I pass the floor to Sean and Giuseppe, who were the main author of this report, I would like to invite the viewers to take part in a short poll via Slido using the hashtag CERRE Energy Data Sharing, or via the QR code on your screen that should be visible on the screen below the image, by responding to one single question. And that question is, what do you think should be the policymakers' first priority for the successful development of a European energy data space? You have the choice between 4 answers here, and the first one is encourage and provide clear incentives for European citizens to share their data, or give market players leeway to develop new business operating models for different use cases, or further push for open standards and interoperability, and finally, set strong data protection and cyber security requirements. So the poll is now open for you to respond to, and will remain open for about 15 minutes until the end of the presentation from our academics, so we can go back to the results and discuss that with our panel later on. So that's it for me, and without further ado, I will pass the floor now to Sean and Giuseppe for their presentation. So Sean, over to you for your presentation.
Giuseppe and I are delighted to be here today presenting our issues paper. And I guess it's worth noting at the beginning that this is the beginning of our work. It's not the end of our work together on this project. And so this is heading towards a more substantial report that will be coming later in a few months. Maybe if we could move over to the slides and a starting slide on the context page, that would be great. We've got some objectives for this research project, which are broad and some that are narrow. So the broad questions are to start talking about how to be joining together data elements with energy use cases. And so we're really going to be focusing on one specific use case, which is related to smart charging. I think it's a really critically important use case for the future and for many of the aims of Europe and other countries around the world, actually. And I think there's a lot of policies that need to be put in place and standards that need to be put in place, perhaps privately, perhaps with government involvement. This remains for discussion. Some of the main questions that we'll be looking at are what sort of property rights would be included within the realm of smart charging data? What would be the business case for industry players and for customers to share their data? If there's no business case for them to do so, it's less likely that it will happen and less likely that some of the benefits from that sharing would arise. What should be the overarching principles governing a European energy data space? This is a very broad question. We hope to contribute to it in at least some modest way. And ultimately, we're interested in what sort of government interventions or data standards involving government might be necessary, if any, for use cases that are related to achieving the green transition. If we could move on to the next slide, please. The context of this in smart charging is really that smart meters have been installed in many countries now, and they've had different standards and different levels of success, I would have to say as well. Some smart meters have been relatively dumb, and I think the future would be looking at having smart charging that was truly smart, and we'll talk about what that would involve. We're going to try and build on the action plan on digitalization of energy of the European Commission, which has some very broad aims that include developing a European data sharing infrastructure for energy and giving European citizens the tools to actively participate in energy markets. And when it comes to smart charging, there's certainly a very strong case for active participation. But we can't ignore some of the other more general necessities, such as improving cybersecurity. And cybersecurity would be key in this area, as would the distribution of digital technology in energy, because without that distribution of the technology, certain specific new energy markets would be very difficult to create. And we'll be looking at moving towards climate improvement, and part of that includes climate neutral solutions for ICT. That might be just a part of what we're aiming for here. So if we go to our use case and the next slide, then I think it's worth talking about smart charging and how it can work. First of all, there's non-smart charging. So non-smart charging is very simply what would happen if you've got an electric vehicle and you plug it in to a charging unit, and you immediately begin charging, and you charge until the battery is full. That would be plug and play, and it's not necessarily very smart. Smart charging can, on the other hand, take account of different levels of energy availability at different times of the day. And so with unidirectional smart charging, you might plug in your car, but it might not start charging immediately. It might wait to begin charging until electricity becomes cheaper, or until there's something that would go along with that cheaper price, which would be a higher level of supply in the system. And one thing we know is that with many renewable sources of energy, such as wind or solar, there are particular times of day when there's a lot of energy, and they're not always predictable whether we're looking at wind or solar. So it's valuable to have this kind of flexibility as we move towards more renewable systems. Then there's the more bidirectional smart charging, which is really a very interesting and important possibility for the future. That should have the electric vehicle battery not only drawing energy from the system when production is high, but relative to demand, but also putting energy back into the system when there's a particular need, and when the vehicle might not be used for transport. And so since vehicles and electric vehicles as well are expected to have a relatively small percentage of their total daily time involved in transport, this is a huge potential benefit of that would use the battery investments that people are making for other purposes that provide real value to the network. We could move on to the next slide. Implementing these types of systems will involve communication between a lot of different potential parties. And this slide is simply meant to illustrate the pure variety of parties that are potentially involved in a electric vehicle charging ecosystem, and the data flows that would be necessary. The main point from this is that there are a lot of different organizations that could potentially be involved and need data in order for the smart charging to occur in a reasonable way, an optimal way, an efficient way, a profitable way. And so this is not simply a line from one party to another with data, but potentially many parties involved in the data. And so having rules about how that data is shared may become quite important, because the potential complexity of these movement patterns for data is high. If we could go to the next slide. So it turns out that smart charging is already affected by a number of pieces of EU legislation and regulations and directives. And some of these include the EU Data Governance Act, plus the Data Act, Network and Information Security Directive, the Electricity Directive, and the Fit for 55 package as a whole. And there will be more elements of EU legislation in the future that will certainly also be relevant to this. And one of our hopes for this overall project is to feed into some of the future developments. If we could move to the next slide. And so I think it's important to lay out some of the basic needs for data with smart charging, and decisions that would need to be taken or enabled by the system that is chosen. One of those questions that's key, first of all, is whether you would allow for a bidirectional smart charging or not. There have been some suggestions that bidirectional smart charging is quite a bit more expensive as an infrastructure to set up than unidirectional. I'm not sure those cost claims are going to be accurate at full scale. I doubt it very much. I think they'll be relatively close in costs. But there will be some additional cost for bidirectional, but also very substantial potential benefits from bidirectional. So there may be need for infrastructure upgrades in some countries more than others, perhaps. A variety of potential sellers and buyers who might be meeting with respect to smart charging and need to have a way of transacting. There might be optimal charging cycles and ways that integrates with battery life if batteries are used very frequently for this bidirectional charging. There are also interoperability needs. Interoperability is already seen as a key element of data in some aspects of the DMA, and could very well that could be the case also with smart charging. And I think it's useful to lay out some criteria that would be valuable for a successful rollout of smart charging. And I would just hypothesize or put out for consideration right now that some of those might include the possibility of cross-format reading and charging, the idea that when costs are lower than price, energy sources would have an incentive to supply, that profitable storage would be incentivized, and profitable returning of energy to the network, and that there would be overall a sufficient return on battery investment, considering the transport needs of car-based batteries to make this whole system work and make sense for users. So now I would like to hand over to my colleague Giuseppe, who will continue talking about in some more specific details about the data needs. So over to you, Giuseppe. And next slide, please.
Thank you, Sean. Against the background illustrated by Sean, the issue paper provides an overview of European legislative initiative aimed to promote the free flow of data in order to frame the specific analysis of the smart charging within the more general scenario. Many of the European data-related legislative initiatives aim to empower digital consumers, making them conscious decision-making in digital markets. However, they significantly differ among themselves in terms of scope and approach. Some interventions are horizontal, others are sector-specific. Some interventions mandate data sharing, others envisage measures to facilitate the voluntary sharing of data. Some introduce general data rights, others allow asymmetric data access rights. Nonetheless, they share one essential technical feature, namely the strong reliance on API, application programming interface, as a key enabler to ensure an effective data sharing ecosystem. Moreover, we are witnessing a progressive shift towards interoperability. In the European data strategy, to overcome legal and technical barriers to data sharing, the Commission has announced the establishment of a EU-wide common interoperable data space in strategic sector, which include mobility and energy. The Commission has identified the lack of interoperability as a crucial element for the exploitation of data value, and the key role of interoperability has been confirmed in the very recent launch of the proposal for a European health data space, that is the first common data space in a specific area that emerged from the EU strategy for data. In general, the emergence of interoperability as the needed solution to ensure an effective data sharing and promote technological innovation reflect the economic feature of digital markets, and the pro-competitive goal underpinning the right to data portability enshrined within the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, probably led to too much high and misguided expectation, since due to the presence of strong network effects, mitigating switching costs through mere data portability has proven to be insufficient in promoting multi-homing and easing data-induced lock-in effects. On this premise, it has been advanced the proposal to rely on an in-situ data right for both individuals and firms, which implies that rather than moving data from the platform, users are allowed to use their data in the location where they reside, and determine when and under what condition third party can access their data. In the European scenario, the access to account rule enshrined in the Payment Service Directive, the second Payment Service Directive, represent an early case of in-situ data right. By the same token, pursuant to the proposal for a data hack and a European health data space, at the user request, data holders are duty-bound to share the relevant data with third parties. Moving to the energy-specific data sharing regime, access and sharing obligation with regards to data have been envisaged in the regulation establishing a guideline on the electricity transmission system operation, the Electricity Directive, the proposed revision of the Renewable Energy Directive, and the proposed revised Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. It is worth noting that the last two revisions, the one related to renewables and the other related to energy performance of buildings, are relevant for the smart charging of electric vehicles and represent further example of an in situ data right that has been already envisaged in the PSD2. A policy intervention about electric vehicles or smart charging may also share with the Data Act the goal to avoid de facto exclusive control over data enjoyed by manufacturer of devices, which according to the Data Act include also vehicles. We can move to the next slide, please. We highlight in the issue paper two key regulatory challenge. Data sharing via APIs require a complex implementation process. Sound standardization initiatives are also crucial for its success, albeit a general consensus has progressively emerged on the systematic adoption of open and standardized APIs. European policymakers have not taken a clear stance towards standardization so far, in particular regarding with who should define the APIs. In general, EU legislative initiatives are rule out the possibility of mandating the adoption of technical standards of interface, opt for providing the Commission with the power to delegate the adoption of European harmonized standards. Against this background, it is worth noting the different approach endorsed by the UK policymaker, which stands out as one of the most advanced cases of mandated interoperability in digital markets. The reference is to the open banking experience, where the CMA, the Competition Market Authority, required major banks to agree on common and open API standards, data formats, and security protocols that would allow new entrants to calibrate their application according to a single set of specifications. For our analysis, such experience is relevant, given that the UK government is ready to expand third-party data access and API standardization to a broader range of financial service and to all regulated markets, including the energy sector. Moreover, in a very recent market study on electric vehicle smart charging, the CMA explicitly referred to UK open banking as a blueprint to fully maximize the benefits of smart charging, suggesting government to set open data and of software standards. Another regulatory challenge that we tackled, we find relevant to address, regards privacy and cybersecurity matters, which significantly affect data sharing practice in general terms, and are particularly relevant for the energy sector, as digitalization increasingly exposed the energy system to cyber attacks and incidents that may jeopardize the security of the energy supplies. In this regard, the issue paper summarized the main European legislative reference, notably the regulation of the internal market for electricity, which assigns specific responsibility with regard to data protection and cybersecurity to transmission system operator and distribution system operators. Further, the Commission is empowered to adopt delegated acts on sector-specific rules for cybersecurity aspect of cross-border electricity flow. Moreover, the Electricity Directive specifically states that the security of smart metering system and data communication shall comply with relevant union security rules. Further, if we look at the forthcoming Commission action plan on the digitalization of the energy sector, in order to support the creation of a European energy data space, well, the action plan proposed action to create a cyber-secure data exchange infrastructure in the energy system. And the action plan will be aligned with the general framework for cybersecurity, in particular the proposed NIS2 directive, the proposal for a Cyber Resilience Act, and the Plan and Network Code on cybersecurity. We can move to the next and final slide, please. Well, about the next step, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation, the issue paper represents just the first step of our project. It is the building block of an upcoming detailed report, which will provide a further analysis of technological constraints of smart charging incentives and a review of a comparable experience. The final aim of this project is to contribute to the debate at EU level, advancing policy recommendations to support a rapid rollout of electric vehicle smart charging data sharing while maintaining appropriate incentive for investment and system integration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean and Giuseppe, for your presentation. There's a lot of food for thought in your slide here, and the report, the issue paper, and the slides are already available on the CERRE website under publication, so you can already find it there since this morning. Here is also the link if you can access it directly here, or you can always contact us via the email address here if you want to receive it by email. Without further ado, I will now invite all the panelists to join now the second part of this discussion today, to join this meeting so we can review together also the result of the poll. And I'm very pleased to have today as part of our panel discussion Mark von Stiphout, who is the Deputy Head of Unit in DG Energy, at the unit responsible for the new energy policies, innovation, and clean coal. We also have today with us Charlie Clark. He's a senior manager in data and decentralization for Ofgem, the UK energy regulator, and he's joining us from Scotland. We also have Quentin Maître here from DRIV. He's the Chief Marketing Strategy and Development Officer. DRIV is a joint venture between EDF and Nuvve, very much dedicated to vehicles, to grid technology in Europe. And finally, we also are pleased to have with us Enzo Ribagnac, who is EU Technology and Trade Policy Specialist at Huawei Technology. So welcome to you all. I would like to ask you first to give us your reaction to the Slido poll, if we can show perhaps the results on the screen for everyone to see on the result. Okay, there's a pretty clear preference for the one or two of the answers. So if we look back at the poll where the question was, what do you think should be policymakers' first priority for the successful development of a European energy data space? And I can't read properly the number here. Is it 42% of the people who answered the poll said they encourage and they think we need to encourage and provide clear incentives for citizens to share the data. And 42 also, I think, are saying they think we need to give marketplace more leeway to develop new business models for different use cases. And there's slightly less support for the third answers, which was requiring further push for open standards and interoperability, and also for a strong data protection and cyber security requirements. So I'd be keen to know perhaps from you, Mark, first, what is your reaction on those results here?
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think that, this shows that, of course, the first thing, let's say, to take care of if we talk about data exchange is to make sure that consumers know why this is worth it, right? And I think that for me, the two answers are very closely linked. It's on the one hand, they need to understand that, let's say, there needs to be something in it for them, but it's also a matter of trust. And so if they know that, let's say, they should be incentivized to share that data because there is a service that they will get in return, and they need to be able to trust the one that provides that service, that it treats their data well. And I think the latter also has to do with choice. And so if you, well, both have to do with choice. If you can choose who you want that service to provide, and if you know that if you don't like it or you don't trust it, you can go somewhere else, then that is, as far as I'm concerned, the best guarantee on the one hand to make sure that the citizens or the customers are willing to share the data, but also are confident that that what they share is actually shared in a reliable way. Because of course we need, we are working hard at EU level in making sure that there are basic requirements of how data are shared, our cybersecurity and privacy rules, for example. But I think what we are trying to do, and then specifically in the energy scene, is to make sure that there is a benefit for consumers to share this data, and also to if they see the benefit, that it's easy to share. So for me, these are very, let's say, also intuitively clear answers, and a good starting point for the work we are doing.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a very strong support and show the important role of consumers and citizens, and how they also care about protecting their data here. Can I ask maybe Charlie quickly to also give your thought on those results, if you have a reaction to this?
Thank you very much, Claire Marie, and thank you for having me here. I think certainly the point Mark makes about citizens and consumers being engaged and having the trust in the framework is critical. Certainly in the UK, we are having some difficulty making the case to consumers about why they should take part in this energy revolution, why they should see the benefit. And I think there's an element of transparency that needs to be built up to allow the consumers to see not just the net zero benefits and may see, but the immediate concrete that a digital decentralized energy network can give them.
Thank you, Charlie. Quentin and Enzo, do you also have a, what are your initial reaction to these results, briefly, if you can?
Yes, maybe regarding data protection and cybersecurity, as Drive is a V1G and V2G platform. We connect to connected electric cars or connected charger to provide smart charging and vehicle to grid. Of course, cybersecurity is one of our priority, because imagine if tomorrow some hackers can connect to our platform and then control thousands of EV chargers across Europe. It would be complex to deal with the power system. And regarding the incentivize to share the data, of course, I fully agree with Charlie and Mark. And we have to be careful about the fact that the customers can actually share their data to third-party operators, because, for example, for EVs today, it is not the case. You mentioned in the study the vendor lock-in, and it's one of the problems today in the EV smart charging and vehicle to grid business.
Great, thank you. Enzo, what's your reaction as well for that issue about data and protection, and also the cybersecurity being less of an issue for audience?
Yeah, I think frankly, somehow the result of the poll is logical, as it was mentioned before. Because at the end of the day, it's the customer and the user that is at the center of everything, right? So on the one hand, the user and the customer wants to have the ability to trust the services that he wants to use, and how this data is going to be used. Trust also that this will always function, and that's also a part of the cybersecurity requirements, right? And on the other hand, the user wants to have incentives. The user wants to have knowledge on what's possible and what are the new opportunities. So frankly, somehow this is very logical that the poll results are like this, and it's part of the priorities, I suppose. So yes, very, very interesting poll.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for your initial reaction. And that's, I think we can close that poll right now and move on to our panel discussion here. And for my first question to all of you will be first, what are your initial reaction to the presentation from Sean and Giuseppe? And, what do you think are the main challenges and opportunities identified for energy data sharing and smart charging? And I would also like to invite our audience to also, provide some questions to our panelists today. And you can do so by using the hashtag CERRE Energy Data Sharing, or via the QR code that will appear on the screen, or through the comments section on LinkedIn or the Twitter and YouTube channel of CERRE. So many ways you can reach us, and we would welcome, receiving more questions from the audience here. If times allow, we will make sure to take those one here. But yes, first, if I can ask you, Mark, again, first to give, what your initial view on the presentation from Sean and what they found out as being, some recommendation as well here. And if you can be, give us a brief reaction, that would be great. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks. And first of all, thanks to Sarah for the report and for the presentation. I think this is really valuable for us for our work for the Digitalization of Energy action plan that we're preparing. That's supposed to come out in September. But this will also not be an endpoint. It will be an action plan that sets out actions in terms of how we're going to make digitalization of the energy system work, or work better, or work faster. So it's very much the start of some things. And so Sarah's involvement, Sarah's advice is very useful. On the report itself and the recommendations, it's clear that making business out of data in the energy sector, where it involves more than one party, is complex. I think Giuseppe and Charles showed this very well. This is not very straightforward. This is a complex ecosystem. If you look at smart charging, the same applies to other type of smart services, in particular if they are involved, if they concern real-time services, but also I think in more general, they require exchange between different parties. And that is kind of by definition the case in the energy system. It also requires a business case, so to say, in terms of when we take the example of smart charging. If network operators say that in order to contribute to frequency stability, you need to have a generation capacity of 100 megawatt, and you need to be able to inject or reduce your production, then you rule out a lot of potential sources of such flexibility service. So the way the market is designed, and the way in particular the network operators allow for smaller quantities of flexibility to participate, defines the use case. And that's the point, I think, also for our action plan, that we are focusing on data exchange, where data exchange is a necessity as part of a policy objective. That is, and we want to start with a few key priorities, one of them being e-mobility, because batteries can contribute really to not just to wholesale market, let's say, changes in consumption and helping people to consume more when the price is low and less when the price is high, but also, for example, in-house optimization of using their own battery, contributing to congestion management in the grid, or contributing to frequency services in the grid. So this is a starting point, and this is what's being worked on by Acer and the associations, the stakeholders, at the moment, through a framework guideline that will then turn into a network code on demand-side flexibility. This is putting in practice the principles that are in the electricity directive, but we see that this needs to hurry up, and it needs to be in a coordinated way if we want to make sure that this functions in an internal market, so that not every network operator defines its own rules of how a battery can provide such a flexibility. So that's a starting point. So that's one thing that needs to happen. And but then, if that is the case, then we want to make sure that aggregation because not every car owner will market his own flexibility himself. You will have service companies who do this. That aggregation is easy, and that there the consumer has a choice. And I think also your report talks about vendor lock-in. I think it's easy if one car company says we are selling cars or we are leasing cars, and all our cars can contribute to a certain service. They can aggregate, they know the data. But we think that the consumer should have the choice who he wants to do this optimization for him. If that's a car company, or if that's maybe an energy company, because he is interested in optimizing, let's say, energy from the car, the solar panels, the heat pumps, and all other intelligent devices into the house. Or if it's a supermarket who says, we want to offer flexibility to everybody who comes here and parks his car at our charging points on our parking lot. So this choice is key. And if we want to make that easy, we need to take, let's say, as a public authority, a step to make sure that this complex ecosystem that needs to be involved agrees on a common set of principles and rules on how to share that data. That is more than standardization. I think also in your paper, you go into the APIs as a concrete step. I don't think in our action plan, we will directly mandate the writing of APIs, but it is clear that we want to set up a, let's say, a business-to-business group that agrees jointly on how this should be done, and that needs to be operational. And so the principles we have, we don't need more principles. We need the industry to come together and agree jointly how this should work. And that's what I think the main step that we want to take with the action plan.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mark, for your reaction and for giving us also some ideas of what will be in your action plans that will be releasing in September, as you said. So moving on, perhaps I would like to ask Charlie from Ofgem now to give us his reaction on the presentation and what what are the challenges, the opportunities identified here, and what he thinks of it. So, Charlie, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Claire Marie. And thank you, Sean and Giuseppe, for an excellent paper. Very much enjoyed reading. There's a lot of food for thought in there, and I'm taking quite a lot from it. Of course, being the UK regulator, European regulator, sadly is no longer something we must focus on. However, what I would like to kind of discuss briefly is with the use case of EVs. I think there's a lot said for different locations of charging as a consideration. For home charger is an EV purchaser, likely has solar panel, likely has power wall or a battery storage. They're the engaged consumers. They are the believers. They're the early adopters, and their EV spending 90% of its time as a lawn ornament. Parked is there as a virtual power plant. Octopus Energy, PN are also working on virtual power plants constructed entirely for these. These are great. However, when the EV is out on the street, parked in a supermarket, we're seeing in the UK a lot of situations where people are being charged parking fees, but not necessarily charging fees. There's a secondary around on street as opposed to off street parking, which is something of interest. I very much like the discussion of batteries, battery life, that being kind of not considered cost of EVs, and I think that was excellent to be called out. And finally, a point brief on the idea of mandating standards for, so mandating data standards, mandating interoperability as far as API standards, and the example that was called out in the paper in the UK. Open banking was to an extent a response to a market failure. It's a situation where it was decided to address the market failure. This way the regulator would come through and would respond to it. And I think in the energy sector, certainly we're in a similar situation. The gas crisis and pricing at the moment has all the hallmarks of a potential market failure, and I believe may at some point get to a position where man will be where we go from on into open finance and created a ecosystem to an extent that's had a lot of spread and a lot of interest. And I think it's certainly for more solid a possibility, then that we'll go from there. That's just my fan. Thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute.
Thank you, Charlie. So it's interesting to see that the UK is taking a different approach. So it'd be also good to compare how things are progressing in Europe, but also in the UK. And I'd like to ask also now the other panelists to react on this paper. So Enzo from Huawei Technologies, what are your initial reactions to the presentation?
Thank you, Kiramari. I mean, frankly, the initial reaction is just congratulating Giuseppe and Shen on the paper, because I think it has done at least three things that are very, very useful for the industry. First of all, I think the choice of electric vehicles, EVs, it's a very good one, because it displays very well the challenges of having a lot of different actors when you want to set standards, when you want to exchange data, when you want to have interoperability. But also, it also displays the challenge of having different actors coming from, generally speaking, different data spaces, and how, again, it adds of a challenge when you have to define standards in the industry. The second reason, it's because what I like very much about this paper is that it maps all the framework that you need to know if you want to understand what's going to be the challenge from a regulatory perspective, but also gives a lot of overview about the work that the industry and that academics are doing, so that you can really understand the challenges and what you should see from a macro perspective on the market and on the technologies. And I think lastly, and it was shown very well by the poll, I think what's great about this paper is that it identified very well the regulatory challenges, right? So on the one hand, of the two regulatory challenges, you have the API, standardization, interoperability, and it displays all this conversations that we can have around them. And on the other side, it discusses data protection and cybersecurity. And again, as I was saying in the poll, it shows very well that those two regulatory challenges are important when you have to settle the energy data space. So I think it gives the right tone, the right angles, so that we can have a fruitful discussion. And yeah.
Thank you, Enzo. And last, I would like to also ask Quentin, we're keen to hear your view on what was presented by academics today. What do you think?
Yeah, thank you so much for this great paper. I think we see in your study that there are a lot of barriers actually to smart lending and vehicle-to-grid business. We have hardware over cost topic, customer acceptance topic, battery cycling topic, etc. But from a smart charging operator point of view today, the first barrier is the data sharing and the access, for example, to the state of charge of the vehicle to perform different energy services, as mentioned by Mark. It's like for an energy company, optimizing electric vehicles charge and discharge. It's like optimizing dam or hydraulic storage without knowing the level of water. So basically, it is impossible. So it's critical for the business and for the energy transition, because without EV flexibility, once again, our energy company vision is that we can't reach net zero for the power system without unlocking the EV flexibility potential. So yes, the data sharing is a key component of smart charging and vehicle-to-grid business. Today, there are two ways of exchange data from the car to the grid. You can do it through the charger, so through the charging station, or you can do it through the a direct connection to the electric car. And we have two problems today. First, a technical problem is that on the charging station part, the EV and the chargers are not communicating the right information. For example, they do not exchange the state of charge data. And then the EV charger, most of the EV chargers for residential customers, they are not connected. They are basic plugs. They are not connected. So it depends on the country. For example, in the UK, there are a lot of connected chargers, but for example, in France, most of the wall boxes are not connected. So even if we had the data, we could not send to external operators. And on the second way of having access to the data, so you have to be connected to the cars. And so you have to connect to car manufacturer APIs. And for the moment, you have a problem of the vendor lock-in. They don't want, some of car manufacturers, they don't want basically you to access to their API, or they want to sell it the data for a big price, which prevents any V1G smart charging business model. So that's basically today, from an energy company point of view and a smart charging operator point of view, the main topic to unlock smart charging and vehicle-to-grid businesses.
Yeah, thank you so much, Quentin. Right, it's great to have so much input from everyone here, and I actually see a lot of questions coming on the Slido here, and I would like to start, asking one of the questions from Martina Facchino, and she's asking, perhaps that's a question for you, Giuseppe, here, since we talked about data, digitalization and potential competition issue, to what extent will the DMA, the Digital Markets Act, apply to the energy sector and in particular to charging stations? So Giuseppe, do you have, are you able to provide an answer to?
Yes, thank you. Well, I would say that in the near future, we do not expect that the DMA is going to apply to a player and service involved in that specific situation, because the DMA is going to apply through a two-stage process. So you have to be designated as a gatekeeper, and you have to, and a specific service, a core platform service should be involved. However, we know that the DMA has a scope that is not narrow defined. So the European Commission is allowed to designate also company that may be prone to become a gatekeeper, and according to market investigation, may enlarge the core platform services. So I would say that in the future, not necessarily in the near one, but in the future, that could be also a sector and a specific service that may be under scrutiny of the DMA. Because again, right now we think about the gatekeeper as the big tech company, but actually gatekeeper in a while may become any kind of company that is creating its own business model within, let's say, an ecosystem and a platform.
Thank you so much, Giuseppe. Does anybody else wants to react to this question or to what Giuseppe just said? Then moving on, I would like to ask an additional question to Quentin and Enzo, coming from the enterprise here sector, the industry. What are the current and existing proposed regulation and that you think can addressing the challenges? Is how can the proposed regulation and other solutions help address the challenges you've mentioned earlier on in your reaction to the presentation? So perhaps starting with you, Quentin.
Yes, so I think in the study, the RED 2 regulation directive was mentioned, and it's funny that this directive mentioned data from the electric vehicles are important for renewable energy integration. And this directive explicitly mentioned that the car manufacturer will be asked to make available key energy data from the electric car, so for example, state of charge, battery, state of health, etc., open to everyone and at no cost. You have the same kind of idea in the EPBD and also in the AFIR directive. So all the new directives coming, they are really aware of the problem and should help a lot to overcome this barrier in the coming year.
Thank you, Quentin. Enzo, what are your thoughts?
So when you mention the regulatory challenge and the identified regulatory challenge, I suppose you mean from the paper, right? So it would be on one side, again, API standardization and interoperability, and on the other side, data protection and cybersecurity. So on the first side, I think there is a lack of existing standards. That's something that was mentioned before. For example, if you take the situation of electric vehicles, as far as I know, the one concerning communication interfaces, the only one is ISO 15118, and it's only for communication between chargers and cars, while the paper defined very well all the different actors that exist, all the different scenarios that exist. So this need for new standards, it's also related to two issues, right? First of all, you have a number of actors that are coming from different sectors that need to get used to interact with each other so that they can define those standards, right? And on the other side, you also need to have means for the private sector to create those standards and those APIs and promote this interoperability. So I think the conversation, as it was said before, is not only about whether or not you have voluntary adoption or mandatory adoption. It's also a lot about how can future legislation and regulatory instruments promote interaction between all the actors. And it was very well said by Mark before on what will be in the action plan. I think also there is room for discussing what should be the framework, what should be the methodology, and also maybe resources for the private sector to define those standards and those APIs. So that's on the first regulatory challenge. On the second one concerning data protection and cybersecurity, since GDPR is supposed to be the horizontal baseline for data protection, I think we should try to see how to build on top of that. Mentioning requirements to apply tested techniques, reasonable efforts for anonymization of data, for instance, is a way to preserve privacy. And on the other hand, you make the legislation future-proof. And then on cybersecurity, I think, from the NIS2 discussion, it's very clear that you need to adopt a zero trust approach and cyber hygiene, because that will ensure the highest level of cybersecurity in the EU, and it would avoid static labeling that would be unstable, inefficient, and that would create just requirements that wouldn't be fair sometimes. So, but for cybersecurity and data protection in general, I think overall the discussion is not only about the requirements; it's also the means of the industry again. So generally speaking, there is an issue concerning cyber skills as well, data protection awareness in the EU. So if you have upcoming regulatory instruments that are dealing with data spaces that will approach cybersecurity and data protection, this ability for having better cyber skills, more data protection awareness is to be addressed as well in upcoming legislation. So that would be how the upcoming legislation could help to improve all those regulatory challenges or solve them.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm conscious we only have 2 minutes left before the end, so sorry we can't take more questions from the floor, but I would like to invite Sean Ennis at least to give his closing remarks or following the discussion today. If you can briefly give us your remarks following the discussion, which I hope you found useful. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you very much, Claire Marie. This has really been an invigorating discussion and very helpful. to us, and as we go further down the our path of policy analysis, I think it'll be very helpful, some of the points that have been brought in today. One I wanted to pick out right now is this question of vendor lock-in and allowing standards to be set by business-to-business discussion. Now, I know that many standards have been set by business organizations dealing with each other, and often where they don't have exactly identical incentives to each other, and they may have some contrary incentives. Here, we really have a bit of a more unique situation in the sense that there's a tremendously large variety of possible incentives out there, and also a kind of default power, perhaps, that might be thought to go to the car manufacturers, who would have very different incentives from the rest of those who are interested in standards. So I think squaring that circle is going to be one of the great challenges for Brussels in the next few years.
Thank you so much, Sean. And indeed, and that will keep us busy for the coming months, or at least. And CERRE will be reconvening everyone again in October, most likely, with the second part of this project, where we will be publishing also a report and some additional policy recommendations. So if you want to keep posted on those future activities, you are all welcome to subscribe to the CERRE newsletter and to follow CERRE on our social media via LinkedIn and Twitter. So you can be up to date. There's actually another event happening very soon in the coming weeks, in mid-July, the 13th of July. We will be hosting a similar event, but looking at the electricity market design. So please, yes, register to this event on our website very soon. So I think this is the end of our meeting. I would like to first congratulate Sean, Ennis and Giuseppe Colangelo for their report, and thank them for their contribution to this topic, and also to all our panelists today for joining this discussion. It was very lively also, so thank you for the audience for your interaction and on the poll, and also via your questions. I hope you enjoyed this video. It will be available on the CERRE website and YouTube channel very soon, so if you can rewatch it again. So I wish you all a very good end of the day, and hope to see you soon in October again. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Very useful, very interesting.